Good evening, everyone. This is Christopher Graw, and this is going to be the last installment of So You Want to Play Dungeon World. This is a bit of a grab bag episode. I'm covering a couple of topics, important topics that I want to cover but didn't quite fit into the previous episodes. So now we've covered what is Dungeon World and why do you want to play it. We've covered the basics of the game, like the stats that make up your character, what kind of classes you can play, what are the basic things that everyone can do, what are the things that only the classes can do, and then also how to run the game, how to be a good game master. So tonight we're going to cover a couple of miscellaneous topics. Again, this is by Sage Latour and Adam Cobell. It's available, I believe, on DriveThru RPG. For the PDF, off the top of my head, I don't remember how much it is, but it's a great buy. I highly recommend anyone pick it up. And all artwork here is copyright to their respective owners. And a special final thanks to Chris Cease for helping me with the presentation. So tonight we're going to talk about these concepts: tags, monsters, equipment, magic items, steadings, and a bit of advanced topics, a bit of do-it-yourself Dungeon World. Tags. Tags are small bits of fiction, 1-2 word max, which inform how the game master portrays the world and informs what players and characters can do. Some tags have mechanical effects. Some tags are purely descriptive and will purely affect how you describe the world. Tags typically relate to armor, weapons, general equipment, monsters, range, like your ability to hit things from a distance, and steadings, which are locations. We'll talk about tags more in depth when we go over each of those topics. Monsters. How you use a monster in Dungeon World follows directly from the agenda and the principles, which we talked about last week when we talked about being a game master. The player characters are the heroes of Dungeon World. Monsters exist to demonstrate what a dangerous place Dungeon World can be and how this world will stay if the heroes don't step in. The game master shouldn't be rooting for the monsters to win. It's not that kind of game. But the monsters can be a challenge to the heroes and can even sometimes defeat them. If you just had an encounter, if your heroes just fought some monsters and you felt like your monsters were beaten too quickly, don't worry about it. Let the players enjoy their victory. There's always going to be more monsters. They'll always get beaten up at some point. The dice won't go their way. They'll make a wrong decision. So let them enjoy the victories, and at the same time, enjoy the fiction that comes from the defeats. A good way to think about monsters, going back again to how to be a GM, is that monsters are the ammunition for a danger you're presenting. So if your danger is the orcish horde, then a monster is like chambering an orc in the orcish horde's magazine and firing it at the players. Dungeon World, the book, has a lot of classic fantasy monsters to use. Orcs, goblins, dragons, stone elementals, giants, I can't even name them all. But it also has a very simple and straightforward monster creation checklist that lets you make pretty much any monster you want in 2 to 3 minutes. And we're going to go through 2 examples of that here. So we have the parts of the monster. These are the things that make up a monster in Dungeon World. They're all fairly self-explanatory. I'll break them down real quick. We have the moves. Just like players have moves and the GM has moves, monsters have moves. They describe things that the monsters can do, their behavior and their abilities. Monsters also have something called an instinct. It's the monster's goal. It can be simple, it can be complex. But it's whenever you're thinking, well, I have this monster, what should it do? Look at the monster's instinct, it will tell you what it should do. Monsters have a description. It says what the monster looks like, smells like, sounds like, feels like, how it acts. Monsters have a damage die. It's how much pain that they can cause the players. Just like the regular players, it's going to be a die between a D4 and a D10, and it might have a modifier or something else applied to it. Monsters will then have tags. They describe how the monster deals damage and includes the range. Some tags describe how big the monster it is, how many of them typically come together, some other things. Monsters have hit points. It's a set amount of hit points, like 5, 10, 20, 50, whatever. 50 would be, I think, a little high, but that's how much damage it's going to take that monster out. They also have armor, just like player armor. If they take damage, you just subtract from that damage taken, and then what's left over goes to their hit points. And then finally, some monsters have special qualities, which describe special innate abilities a monster has that's important to play. So there are, on the other hand, some monsters, they're called monsters without stats, MWS. Now, here, as you can see, Cthulhu is devouring this temple hole and people are trying to escape him in a rowboat. You don't stat Cthulhu. Cthulhu might be what we call a BFM, a big fracking monster. It's beyond a concept like hit points or armor or damage. A player character attacking Cthulhu with the sword, no, it doesn't matter how many hit points Cthulhu has because he has too many for you to attack him with the sword. Then, on the flip side of that coin, there could be a monster that's so much of not being a threat to the players that it doesn't have to have hit points or armor or damage because it doesn't matter. It's like swatting a fly. Now, these monsters, both the big fracking monsters and the little tiny monsters, they can still cause trouble, and they should still get moves and tags and instincts, but they're not necessarily something that require all of the stats of a monster, because your characters aren't so much going to be fighting them. Now we're going to create 2 sample monsters really quickly. And I'm not going to go through everything in the checklist, because it would just be me listing a bunch of things, but I'll go through what each step in the checklist is. Step 1, what is the monster known to do? 2, what does it want that causes problems for others? 3, how does it usually hunt or fight? 4, how big is it? 5, what is its most important defense? 6, what is it known for? And here you choose all that apply instead of just one. 7, what is its most common form of attack? And 8, which of these describes it? And that's another one where you choose multiple options, or you can. So here's the Snarglin. The Snarglin has these tags. It's a horde, which means it usually comes in you see a lot of them at one time. You're not really going to see one Snarglin, or 2, or even 5. You're going to see a lot of Snarglin. Snarglin are tiny. They're small, maybe up to your knee or such, and they're stealthy. They're easy to miss. They can hide, and we'll get into that a little bit more. They deal damage with their teeth, their razor-sharp teeth, and their damage is d6 minus 2 damage. Not a lot of damage, but 1 piercing. It means it can go through 1 armor, because they have very sharp teeth. They only have 3 hit points, and they have 0 armor, and their range is hand. They have to get right on top of you to fight you. They're very easy to take out one-on-one. Of course, you usually don't fight them one-on-one. You fight them 1-on-50. And they have no armor, because they just wander around in loincloths. The Snarglin description is cute until they reveal their razor-sharp teeth. These smaller cousins of the goblins love nothing more than to kill and eat farmers' cattle. And they can turn invisible. Where did they learn that trick? Their instinct is to feed on cattle. Their moves are to swarm the weakest opponent and to become invisible. So as an example of how you'd use a monster move, if you remember back, for the Game Masters, one of their moves is to use a monster move. So if a player missed a move where they gave you a golden opportunity, or any of the examples where you would use a GM move, you can instead slot in a Snarglin move if the Snarglins were present. They could swarm all over whoever looked weakest, or they could poof, become invisible. On the complete other flip side of the coin, the Snarglin is perhaps, on individual level, the least threatening monster you could ever fight. We have the Guardian. The Guardian is solitary. You only ever see the Guardian, only one Guardian, because there is only one Guardian in this case. And he's huge. He's colossal. He's the size of a house, of a barn. Now he fights with his giant stone fists, which deal 1d10 plus 5 damage and are forceful. Forceful is a tag where if you get hit with it, it doesn't just hit you, it throws you across a room. And some classes can be forceful too. The Barbarian actually applies forceful to literally any weapon it picks up. It has 31 hit points, 3 armor, and reach. It can hit things from further away than merely arm, reach, or with a hand or such. So its description is, it's an ancient construct built of sandstone. The Guardian has stood watch over the city of the dead since its founding. Since the death of the last king of Joffrey, no living thing has ever gotten past the Guardian. Its instinct is to protect the gates to the city of the dead, and its moves are to crush something small, and of course that might be relative to the Guardian, and to block the way past. So those are two completely different monsters that I created for this episode in under 3 minutes each. That's how easy it is to make a monster for Dungeon World when there isn't one pre-made in the book already. Next, equipment. So you have your character, and we know what we're fighting with our characters, and we know what their stats are and what they can do, but they're not just punching them, they use things. They use equipment. Equipment includes weapons and armor and more mundane equipment that's not necessarily combat-oriented. Equipment is made up of tags, just like monsters, and the tags tell you about how the equipment affects the character using it, like plus armor, or it suggests something about the way it is used, like a range tag. The tags guide the fiction. So starting with weapons, I'm going to give you just a couple of examples of weapons. And remember, the tags tell you everything you need to know about the weapon. And also remember that damage is based on the class, not the weapon. So I'm going to say I have a sword, and you might wonder why I don't say the damage die. It's because the fighter does d10 damage. It's not that the sword does d10 damage. And that's one of the differences between Dungeon World and, say, Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. So we have a fine bow, and the tags are near and far, 60 coins, and 2 weight. So the bow has a range of both near, as far as you could throw a stone, and far as someone can hear you shouting. It's going to cost you 60 coins to buy, and it weighs 2, and weight goes up against your load, and we talked about that when we talked about characters. Accompanying the bow is a bundle of arrows, which is 3 ammo, 1 coin, and 1 weight. And that 3 ammo is what feeds into the volley move, where on a 7 to 9, you can choose to expend ammo instead of one of the other options. Now we have a long sword, perhaps one of the most basic weapons you can have. It's close, meaning you can only hit with as far as you can reach with the sword itself, maybe a couple of feet. It's +1 damage. It's a good weapon, so you don't just deal your class damage, you actually do an extra 1. It's 15 coins, and it's 1 weight. And my final example is the halberd. Just like the longsword, it's +1 damage, but instead of being close, it's reach. You can actually reach maybe 7, 10 feet with this thing, but if someone gets in close, you're not going to be able to fight them off. Your weapon's too big. It's also two-handed. You have to use 2 hands to use a halberd. Sure, maybe you can hold it in 1 hand, but when the shit hits the fan, you can't have a shield and a halberd. Not going to work. It's 9 coin, and it's 2 weight. Next, we move on to armor. There's only 4 kinds of armor. Leather chainmail, which is 1 armor. It's worn. It's a tag that literally means you have to wear it to get its use. It's 10 coin and 1 weight. There's scale mail, which is 2 armor. It's worn and it's clumsy, 50 coin and 3 weight. And then we have plate armor, big bad armor, 3 armor, worn, clumsy, 350 coin and 4 weight, very heavy. Lastly, we have a shield. The shield's the only armor that is +1 armor. It's the only armor that's additive. So you can wear scale mail 2 armor and a shield plus 1 armor and get 3 armor. You can't wear plate mail on top of leather chainmail. Simply doesn't work. And I mentioned this in a previous episode, but Clumsy is a tag that applies to some of the heavier armor, and Clumsy gives a character -1 to all moves. And by default, only the fighter, the paladin, and potentially the barbarian can wear armor with the Clumsy tag without that penalty. Last, we have dungeon gear. This is the more mundane, not armor, not weapons. It's the things that you need out and about while you're adventuring. I'm going to give you 3 quick examples. This is not everything, and of course you can make, just like armor and weapons and monsters, you can make up dungeon gear. All you need is a description and a couple of tags. You can even make up your own tag, especially based on whether it's important in your campaign or not. There's adventuring gear. Adventuring gear is 1 item. It's kind of like a bag of stuff, and you reach your hand into it and you grab what you need. Its tags are 5 uses, 20 coin, and 1 weight. And its description is, adventuring gear is a collection of useful, mundane items, such as chalk, poles, spikes, ropes, etc. And when you rummage through your adventuring gear for some useful, mundane item, you find what you need, and you mark off a use. So let's say we're deep in the bowels of some cave, and we've lost all natural light, and I say, well, I need a torch. Well, I haven't written down torch on my character sheet. I have written down adventuring gear. So I say, okay, I reach into my backpack and I pull out a torch. I mark off 1 use of adventuring gear. Boom, I have a torch. That easy. Now, obviously, a torch is going to be used up over time when you light it. But if you say, oh, we need to climb down this steep wall, I have some rope and a grappling hook, as you can see on the left side of our illustration here. Boom, I mark off adventuring gear. I pull out the rope and grappling hook. Unless that somehow gets taken away from me, the rope and grappling hook doesn't get used up. So I can actually write that on my sheet and know in the future I have that rope and grappling hook. Next we have Dwarven Hardtack. Tags requires dwarf, ration, it fulfills ration needs in various moves, 7 uses, 3 coin, 1 weight. Its description is, dwarves say it tastes like home, everyone else says it tastes like moldy bread stuffed into an old sock. So there's another item called a dungeon ration. It costs a little more, it has less uses, and it fulfills the need for rations. Dwarves, however, can eat this disgusting hardtack, and they love it, and everyone else hates it. So they get a little bonus there. And finally, we have Halfling Pipe Leaf. It has 6 uses, costs 5 coin, 0 weight. Now this doesn't require Halfling. As you notice, it didn't say requires Halfling. When you share Halfling Pipe Leaf with someone, expend 2 uses, 1 for each of you, and take +1 forward to parley with them. Think back to The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, where the halflings are sitting there smoking in their pipe, talking to someone, and having a good conversation. It's a mood setter. It helps you speak with other characters. That's what it's supposed to represent. And there's, in the book alone, at least another 20 or 30 more mundane equipment, as well as strange things like poisons, and you can always make up your own. Lastly, the book contains lists of some basic and common goods and services, hireling costs, meals, transportation, cost of land and buildings, bribes, gifts, the value of common hoards, like, well, how much gold does a dragon hoard have? Well, it typically has 1,000,000 coin or whatever. I don't remember off the top of my head. So the book has these lists in there. You can always change them, make them up, but these are just some basic things. Moving beyond more mundane equipment, we come to magic items. Magic items are for the Game Master to create. They should be probably tied to your campaign, although they can be more generic depending on the situation. They should be truly unique items which are magical. They shouldn't have just a +1 modifier. That's not interesting. To have a +1 sword is not interesting. You want a sword that, thinking back again to Lord of the Rings, you want to have a sword that glows in the presence of orcs, because that is genuinely, it gives you something to use, rather than just, well, it gives me a +1. That doesn't drive the story forward. Within the game, magic items can be created by a wizard's ritual move or a similar move, or it could be a spoil of a battle or a reward for a quest, or you could find under stabbed inside of this strange rock in the middle of the woods, or given to you by a lady in a lake. As we know, strange ladies in the lake dispensing swords is a strange way to name a king, but this is Dungeon World. Now, Dungeon World offers a lot of examples of magic items, I think about 40 or 50, but magic items are really up to the GM to create as needed. If there's something in there that looks good and should slot right into your campaign, great, but otherwise it's better to use them as an example. I'll give you one quick example here. It's the arrows of Acheron. They're 1 ammo and 1 weight. Now remember, 1 ammo doesn't mean you can only use it once, but it means if you have to spend it for a move for some reason, it's gone. And all it has is a description. Crafted in darkness by a blind Fletcher, these arrows can find their target in even the deepest darkness. Any archer may fire them blind, in the dark, with his eyes bound by heavy cloth, and still be assured of a clean shot. But if the light of the sun ever touches the arrows, they come apart like shadow and dust. So you only have a couple of them, represented by the 1 ammo, but they can hit anything, so long as they never see the light of day. Some other example magic items grant characters access to special moves that you might have to roll on, but will give you truly magical results. Next, we're going to cover steadings. Back on the GM side, steadings are the civilization found between the wilderness, between the dungeon and the jungle of the grand tiger spirit and the vast ocean. There's that one bastion of civilization. There are villages, towns, keeps, cities, castles. These are the places the characters will rest in and then inevitably get kicked out of for starting trouble. And just like everything else in Dungeon World we've been talking about, they're made up of tags. Steadings have 3 major descriptors. They have a prosperity descriptor, which can range between dirt poor and rich, and there's a couple in between there. They have a population descriptor, which doesn't necessarily describe how many people live there, but whether people are leaving or it's doing very well. And it goes from exodus, where almost everyone's left, to booming, where the city or town is bursting at the seams with people. It also has defenses, which range from none, absolutely 0 defenses, all the way up to legion, thousands of soldiers. And there are other tags that can be applied to steadings. They can include religions, guilds, major NPCs are tags, races. If, say, you go into a dwarven city, it would have the tag dwarf, because it's not just a regular city where you assume it's mostly humans but a mix of everything else, but you know you go there, it's almost all dwarves. And there's a bunch of other tags. And finally, we're going to get to our last topic, which is advanced delving, and it's making moves, customizing Dungeon World for your own game. And there's a couple of different moves that you can create. They have broad categories. They're not really supposed to lock you into stone, but we kind of break them down into world moves, which reflect something special and unique about your world. Class moves that reflect new powers that a player, or rather a character, can have. And sometimes the reason you make moves is that sometimes you need a player to make a move. You're playing the game and you said, okay, you should roll dice, but I don't have a move here that properly describes the situation you're in. And yes, Defy Danger is kind of a catch-all move whenever there's something dangerous going on, but you want something not only more specific, but reusable. You really want to make a move when you're planning on using this move over and over again. Defy Danger is great for one-offs, but if you're going to be doing this thing repeatedly, making your custom move is the way you want to go. That would be a good world move. For characters, sometimes your character is going to want to do something, and that thing is going to make perfect sense for their character, for their class. But there just isn't a class move in the book that fits it. Not on their class, not on another class for them to maybe just kind of take it or multi-class. Here's some examples from the book. Well, actually, here is building a move. Sorry. Each move has a basic structure, and if you go back to every move in the book, they have this basic structure. It's a two-part structure. It has a trigger, which says when, and it has an effect that says then. So when this happens, then do this. That's every move. Here's some example triggers taken from the move. And these are not necessarily exactly what the move says, but rather describing the trigger from the move. So in Discern Realities, the trigger is when a character takes action. In the move Backstab from the Thief, it's when a character takes action under specific circumstances. You're not just taking an action, stab someone, you're taking an action under the specific circumstance of stabbing them in the back. In the move Order Hirelings, it's a move that, when circumstances dictate, there's no character action, because Order Hirelings is whenever hirelings are doing something dangerous. A good the magic item move is when a character uses a thing. So when the character uses the Arrows of Acheron, it triggers the arrow's move. And then other moves like Poisoner, which let you use poison without danger, is simply from when on. Its trigger is from now on, and its effect is you can use poison safely. And here are some effects that can come in moves. And you can have more than one effect in a move. Most moves have more than one effect. And these are just some of the examples. You could have roll, and this is extremely common. When you do this, roll dice, and we'll see what happens. Not every move rolls, but the vast majority of moves require rolls. We have substitute stats, negate damage, give a bonus or penalty, forward or ongoing, so for the next roll or for rolls going forward, deal or heal damage, choose options from a list, hold and spend that hold for future results, ask and answer, change circumstances, mark experience, call for more information, and add options. Alright, here's an example of a world move that we create, and this is taken right from the Dungeon World book. This is an example they listed in the Advanced Delving chapter. When you open a sewer hatch, roll plus strength. On a 10 plus, choose 2, and on a 7 to 9, choose 1. So if you go to the Dungeon World book and you read this example, they actually talk about the situation that gave rise to the move, and it was that they were in a city and the sewers in the city were sealed off to keep things inside them. So they said, okay, so it's dangerous just opening the sewers, and we need a move to represent that. So here are the choices that they can choose. You avoid being covered in feces and rotting animal entrails from the sewers. You avoid having a gelatinous cube land on you, unlike that guy in the picture. You find a secret back entrance to where the merchant's daughter is being held. Now this move is tied to a specific place at a specific time in a specific game, especially that last option. You find a secret back entrance to where the merchant's daughter is being held. Obviously, at that time, they were looking for a merchant's daughter. Other world moves can be a bit more generic, or they can be extremely specific. It all just depends on what you need for your game. Here's an example class move, also taken directly from the book. It's for the Cleric, and when you claim a room for your deity, mark every entrance and roll plus wisdom. On a 10 plus, the room is peace bonded. No one can take action to cause physical harm within it. On a 7 to 9, the room is peace bonded, but the show of divine power draws attention. You can dismiss the peace bond as you see fit. So the character, what he wanted that eventually caused this move to be created is he said, I want to be able to consecrate a room against not necessarily intrusion, but against combat. And you can see this being useful in a dungeon or even in a civil situation where you want two characters to not go at each other for some reason. So they created this, and it fits perfectly for a cleric, especially if that's a cleric whose deity is dedicated to the idea of peace or non-conflict. So I did not end up getting any questions. Let's see if I got any during the broadcast. I did not. But if you have any other questions about Dungeon World, please feel free to contact me on Google+. I am Christopher Grau, Grau, and I'm happy to answer any questions or just join the Dungeon World Tavern community. I know a couple of people that watch are already members, but if you're not, it's a Google+ community. It's an amazing resource for Dungeon World. And the creators of Dungeon World, Sage and Adam, are always there and always happy to help you out. And honestly, I can't say this enough. Just buy the book. I think it's $10 on DriveThruRPG. It's worth it. You can even find the rules, most of the rules, for free online because the game is Creative Commons. And it's just a great game to play. If you couldn't tell, I just dedicated hours of my life writing this and presenting it, and because I think it's worth it, and I think it's a game that people should play. And I would, if I wasn't so busy, I would be happy to run it for pretty much anyone that ever asked. Now, I am going to do some more So You Want to Play. The plan right now for the future is I'm taking the summer off. I have a couple of college courses I'm taking this summer to finish a license, and then either during the summer, during some sort of break, or at the end of the summer, I'm going to do 2 mini episodes. I'm going to do one on World of Dungeons, which is actually a thought experiment slash joke hack of Dungeon World, where someone said, "Oh, okay, Dungeon World. What would happen if Dungeon World was written in 1979? What would that game look like?" And the entire game is on 2 double-sided pieces of paper. So it's a fun little mini game that can actually go a long way, and it feels like a truly old school game that is still Dungeon World. So I'm going to do a little mini episode on that. I'm going to do a little mini episode on a game called Simple World, which is actually a reductive hack of Apocalypse World, where someone took Apocalypse World, stripped it down to the bone, and said, go create your own setting, and this game allows you to do that. And that's another fun little game, because if you say, okay, I want to play hunter-gatherers at the dawn of civilization, they're obviously, or at least off the top of my head, I don't know any games that allow you to play hunter-gatherers at the dawn of civilization. You could sit down with Simple World, and over the course of an hour, a game master and their players could actually bang out a usable game and play that and adapt it as they go and play that hunter-gatherer game. And then after I do those 2 mini episodes, I'm either going to move forward and cover the original World game, the game that spawned all of their Powered by the Apocalypse games, and that is Apocalypse World. Or I'm going to cover a game that's a little more niche, but near and dear to my heart, and that is Saga of the Icelanders, a game that lets you play the settlers of Iceland in the 10th and 11th century, when Christianity is just barely coming to Iceland, and you're trying to eke out a living on this harsh, completely empty rock that has more sheep than people and no other natural resources. So that's the plan for now. Thank you everyone for watching So You Want to Play Dungeon World. Please get in touch with me if you have any questions about Dungeon World or any other role-playing games. Everyone, thank you very much and have a good night.